One of cinema's biggest female stars of the 1940s, Joan Fontaine, was an actress whose on-screen image differed greatly from the reality of her life. Directors sought her out for her ability to convey restraint and vulnerability. But away from the camera, she was no pushover. She fought for and won some of the period's most coveted roles, and engaged in one of Hollywood's most notorious feuds with her elder sister and fellow actress, Olivia de Havilland. And it was Fontaine, not James Stewart, Grace Kelly, or Cary Grant, who gave the only Oscar-winning performance in a Hitchcock film. She spoke about all these things with the interviewer Derek Hart on the program Talking Film.
Miss Fontaine, you were born de Havilland.
True.
In Tokyo.
Worse than that, de Beauvoir de Havilland, while you're at it.
De Beauvoir de Havilland.
Yes.
You were born in Tokyo of British parents.
Yes.
Did you feel at an early age that you were going to be an actress? Was this a certain plan for you?
Well, that's rather interesting. My mother had been with the Royal Academy, and I suppose we can call it a disappointed actress. In her words, her family wouldn't let her go on the stage because it wasn't done.
This was the Royal Academy of Dramatic
Yes,
Art.
and music too. She did a whole lot. So she hated our attempts to be as American as the locals. And so she sat us down and made us do Shakespeare and everything else at very tender ages. And we kind of took to it, and I went round reciting poetry. It must have been ghastly at 9 and 10. And then Olivia and I did little Shakespearean skits, Portia and Larissa, and all those things for the local ladies' clubs and whatnot. So then I went back to school in Japan, and I found a diary, and I think, especially if you're an actress, it's a very ridiculous thing to keep a diary. Very, very dangerous, but I had kept one for a brief moment, and in which I had speculated about my future as to what I was going to be, and it was a toss-up between a librarian, a house painter, and an actress, and so I'm rather glad I chose this one.
When you decided to become an actress in San Francisco, did you then immediately move to Los Angeles, to Hollywood, or did
Well, actually, that was in Japan, where I went back to school. By the time I returned to California, I found my sister, though she'd won a scholarship, and she was an extraordinary student, to a very fine college in California, had been selected to understudy in Max Reinhardt's A Midsummer Night's Dream, which she did. And like those extraordinary fables that nobody believes but are usually filmed, the opening night, the leading lady became ill, and Olivia had the part, stole the reviews, the great cliche occasion of all time. And so by that time, I had rather got myself engaged to be married. One of my many times I've done that. I'm still prone for that sort of thing. Nasty habit, can't break it. And so went to see my mother and sister who were in Hollywood to say goodbye. And an agent saw me at a party and said, "Wouldn't you like to be an actress?" Well, it seemed so simple and so easy. I mean, that did it. I said, "Certainly." Well, having said I would, then how do you become one? And having decided to be one, you can't let go.
The first movie that you made was which?
It was one with Joan Crawford, and not under any name I can even remember now, called No More Ladies, I believe. And I was 18, maybe not that. And I was supposed to play a sophisticated rival of about 40. But that's Hollywood. I must have been hideous in it.
But how many movies did you make before you starred in Rebecca?
Well, I was what we call the Queen of the Bees.
Of the B movies.
B movies. And I'm glad. That is the best technique, really, the study of what you're doing, where you're going, where your marks are, get all that over with. And I played all the leads, and that couldn't have been better. I must have made about 5 a year or so.
How did you then make the leap into Rebecca?
I'd actually almost given up films. The whole idea of it was going to be married. And I was sitting next to David Selznick at a party and mentioned that I read the book, and he said he'd bought it that day and would I care to test. I tested along with everybody else you can ever imagine. And I was on my honeymoon. Of course, had I not married, this would not have happened. I mean, let this be a lesson to you not about marriage, but to everybody. Go far away, and what you want will happen. Stay there, and it won't.
This was a movie with Laurence Olivier, wasn't it?
Right,
At the time?
yes, and George Sanders.
I remember. And Alfred Hitchcock directed.
What a slap in the eye I must have been to them then. I suppose that's why you married me. Because you knew I was dull and gauche and inexperienced, and could never be any gossip about me.
Gossip? What do you mean?
I don't know. I just said it for something to say. Don't look at me like that. Maxim, what's the matter? What have I said?
Wasn't a very attractive thing to say, was it?
No. It was rude, hateful.
I wonder if I did a very selfish thing in marrying you.
How do you mean?
I'm not much of a companion to you, am I? You don't get much fun, do you? You ought to have married a boy. Someone of your own age.
Maxim, why do you say this? Of course we're companions.
Are we? I don't know. I'm very difficult to live with.
No, you're not difficult. You're easy, very easy. Our marriage is a success, isn't it? A great success? We're happy, aren't we? Terribly happy. If you don't think we are happy, it would be much better if you didn't pretend.
Can you say what it was like to work with Hitchcock for the first time?
He was darling, a bit formidable, enormously bawdy sense of humor. And he had a habit, whether it was conscious or not, I don't know, but of rather keeping all his actors at loggerheads. So he would be the one in the middle, rather puckish. Good for me, because it made me suffer quite a lot and feel quite miserable all the time. And it probably came out on the screen that way.
I don't want to know.
This scene from Rebecca is with Judith
You
Anderson.
could be Mrs. De Winter. Live in her house. Walk in her steps. Take the things that were hers. But she's too strong for you. You can't fight her. No one ever got the better of her. Never, never. She was beaten in the end. But it wasn't a man. It wasn't a woman. It was the sea.
Oh, stop it, stop it, oh, stop it.
You're overwrought, madam. I've opened a window for you. A little air will do you good. Why don't you go? Why don't you leave Manderley? He doesn't need you. He's got his memories. He doesn't love you. He wants to be alone again with her. You've nothing to stay for. You've nothing to live for, really, have you? Look down there. It's easy, isn't it? Why don't you? Why don't you? Go on. Go on. Don't be afraid.
He had absolutely no nonsense about mood or meaning or any of that. He was telling a story, expected you to tell it with him, in absolutely common terms. No theories like the actor's studio or any of that. Made it terribly clear. And I remember finally I had to cry one day, quite a lot, and I said, Hitch, I just can't cry anymore. He said, well, kid, what are we going to do? And I said, well, slap me in the face. He said, fine. Off he went, slapped me in the face. I went back, and the tears came down. Partly pain, but a great deal of gratitude for his understanding. It was wonderful of him.
You said that he made you suffer quite a lot during the making of that thing, and that it was probably good for you. In what way do you mean?
Oh, well, I think that if you're playing an insignificant little girl that has a terrible inferiority complex, that it's better not to praise her too much and tell her she's marvelous, or you'll undo what you want. It was a little difficult. I remember Larry Olivier telling a rather off-color joke. As a matter of fact, the first time I'd ever heard a certain four-letter word ever spoken. And Hitch said, oh, I wouldn't speak like that in front of Joan. After all, she is a bride. And Larry said, oh, who'd you marry? And I shyly said, well, Brian Ahern. And he said, oh, couldn't you have done better than that? So I think that's part of the treatment I was getting. It certainly helped the acting.
It helped the acting to the extent that you were nominated for an Academy Award in that
And lost
movie,
it.
weren't
And
you?
the picture won it. Hitchcock, I don't think, got it. I may be wrong, but I don't think he got it for that. Then, of course, I did Suspicion. Did get it for that, also directed by Hitch. And I don't think the picture got it, but there you are, that happens.
Have you ever been kissed in a car before? 1941, Suspicion with Cary Grant.
Joke with me. I'm no good at joking. I don't know how to flirt.
Oh, I'm not joking, I'm serious. Have you ever been kissed in a car?
Never.
Would you like to be?
Yes.
Well, you're the first woman I've ever met who said yes when she meant yes.
What did the others say?
Hanged if I know anything but yes.
But they kiss you.
Usually.
Have there,
Have there what, monkey face?
have there been many?
I'm afraid so, quite a few. One night when I couldn't fall asleep, I started to count them. You know, the way you count sheep jumping over a fence? I think I passed out on number 73.
Are you always frank with them like this?
No, not particularly.
Why are you frank with me? Because I'm different?
No, it isn't that. I'm honest because with you, I think it's the best way to get results.
I hope I'm not saying the wrong thing. But I love you.
Well, get undressed, old girl. What are you waiting for?
Johnny, I'm in a state tonight. I don't know why. I'd like to be alone. Would you mind sleeping in your dressing room?
Of course I'd mind.
Please, Johnny, I haven't been sleeping very well lately.
I understand. You used to sleep badly when I wasn't here, and now you... All right, if that's the way you feel about it. Good night.
You won an Academy Award as the Best Actress of the Year for your part in Suspicion. Can you describe what the whole of the ballyhoo of the Academy Awards was like?
Well, this was frightening to me because Olivia was up for it also.
Your sister?
And I never expected to get it. Had I not got it for Rebecca, I thought it's silly to think of it for Suspicion because they weren't comparable to me. And I was making a picture called The Constant Nymph. And Olivia called me that day, as did the head of the Screen Actors Guild, Jean Herschelt, and said, you are coming? I said, no, I can't. I've got to get up at 5 in the morning. I'm going to be on the set until 6:30 tonight. I couldn't begin. I haven't any clothes to wear or anything else. So Olivia, and we were supposed to be enemies at this time, which is so ridiculous, brought a seamstress over and several lovely gowns that she had purchased for me, tried them on the set, and did all that. It was so sweet and so wonderful of her.
But the legend of you and your sister constantly feuding
Isn't it fun?
Has no foundation.
Oh, it has lots of foundation, but no fact. How's that? You like that? Olivia and I were brought up very, very strictly by our mother, and we were all living in Hollywood together. I was, at that time, having to ask if I could go out in the evening, having to report in. Olivia the same, and we never had time. We were all working. We didn't have time to go to nightclubs or have beaux, really. And if they did, they had to come to call and have tea with Mother and all that sort of thing. So there was no scandal, nothing. As a matter of fact, I skipped a whole youth that never happened to me at all. Going out to dances and being gay and all that sort of thing. We didn't do that. So there was nothing they could write about. Olivia was under contract to Warner Brothers, I to RKO. And I would simply imagine that the heads of the publicity department kind of got together and said, what are we going to do about these spinster ladies? And this evolved. That at least it was a feud which got the names of the pictures in and the studios and all that.
How much of the great Hollywood spectacular days did you catch?
I was very fortunate because by the time I was there, Mary Pickford had retired in splendor to Pickfair, which was the example of gracious living, shall we say. So everybody wanted to live more or less like that. Then the war coming, nobody could travel. And it's a terrible thing to say, but there was nothing to spend one's money on, really nothing at all. So everybody got bigger and better houses and more silver pheasants running down the dining room tables and that kind of thing. And entertaining, everybody had to outdo the others. Naturally, everybody had their swimming pool, and that was usually covered with a dance floor, huge tent erected, living trees of lilacs and roses brought in, paving the way from the house to the tent, and several orchestras, perhaps. And naturally champagne and everything, but this was almost a nightly occurrence. It was really fine and rather boring. You know, ho-hum, here we are at another one. Well, there are not as many roses tonight. And one party, which wasn't too long ago, the Jack Benny's gave, and I hadn't been to Hollywood for a long time, so I was asked to that. It was about 5 years ago. It was for, I believe, Heifetz or somebody like that. And Mary had got glorious peonies, I don't know what, from San Francisco down, the usual tent, everything. And I was thunderstruck. Here were all the men in one end of the room talking about business. All the most beautiful women in the world, beautifully gowned, talking about their children or their servant problems. We went into this lavish place to dine. Nobody danced. And everybody had to leave, of course, by 11 o'clock because they were all working the next morning. And I'd forgotten that this was the way one lived. Very disappointing for a hostess. Terribly nice of her to go to so much trouble, but rather extraordinary to see. And I shall never forget, as I got in the car, Gary Cooper came down the brick path from the house, knocked on the window and said, "Have fun, kids." And I didn't know it, but he was dying of cancer, and he died within 3 months. And that one thing makes him stand out more than anything else he ever did in his life, because I think he wished that maybe he could be rushing off and doing something else too.
Did you ever feel that you were the victim of the Hollywood publicity machinery?
In the beginning, it was frightful, and I think it's frightful for anybody to have their marriage constantly attacked. I remember one woman saying in the press that Brian and I were divorcing, and I called her, which I shouldn't have done. I learned better then. And she said, "Well, we haven't seen you around lately." And I said, "Well, of course not. I'm working. I'm home at 7 every night, I'm at 5. And so is he." And she said, "Well, if you're still together in 6 months, I'll retract it." But that leaves it. It's multiplied. Your friends ring you or write you or say, "Isn't it dreadful?" Before you know it, you are divorced. And it's a terrible thing. And I think just the negative thought, it plants the seed, and your friends seem to get used to it when you're not. And it's a horrid thing, horrid.
Did that kind of thing happen a lot in Hollywood?
I think it happens all the time.
So this meant that really any Hollywood marriage had to fight like hell to survive.
With your own family, your own friends, with your own studio, yes. Without any grounds, perhaps, at all. And then if you did go home before your husband did at a party because you had to get up early, what husband was left in the lurch by his movie star wife would be in the press the next day. So you don't really stand a chance.
Fontaine was very familiar with the dark side of Hollywood, and so the topic came up again in a program called Hollywood Greats with Barry Norman in 1979.
As far as the stars were concerned, the real bosses were the Mayers, the Jack Warners, the Sam Goldwyns and the Coens. And these people ran their studios like medieval baronies or like dictatorships, not always benevolent. These were the men that the stars had to placate and whose rules they had to follow if they wished to thrive. The fact that the moguls were in turn subject to the whims and the dictates of the New York office and the stockholders didn't really matter. In Hollywood itself, the moguls were the law. On one occasion, for example, Miss Fontaine was persuaded to go on a trip with other starlets to have some publicity pictures taken, or so they were led to believe.
Rather amusing story, I think, because I was told we had to go up to Arrowhead Springs, where there's a big hotel, and there was going to be a distributors meeting. And a distributors meeting really is an excuse for everybody to come to Hollywood and leave their wives at home. It looks like business. So I went with my mother, and they all were horrified, and they said, "Get rid of the old lady." And my mother, of course, overheard this, and she said, "Joan is coming to bed when I am, and that will be all." And I went with my mother, and the next morning, mother got on the phone. She was not a Hollywood mother, a theatrical mother at all. She didn't push us. But she said, "My daughter's up here to take pictures. Where's the cameraman?" And nobody appeared. They were all hung over, of course. Mother kept on the phone persistently, and finally some big bemused cameraman came up and with a jaundiced eye, looked through the camera, took some photographs of me, and they sent me packing home. And I was called into the publicity office the next day and was accused of being high hat and snobbish and all this sort of thing because I hadn't been one of the gang, and I was fired. The only trouble with Hollywood, you know you're running out of it. You're going right straight through it and out the other end. It's not a cul-de-sac because they don't watch it that long anyway.
Eventually, Fontaine would pour all her experiences into a tell-all autobiography. She called it No Bed of Roses. One of her ex-husbands would call it No Shred of Truth. Its publication in 1978 led to this appearance on The Tonight programme with the interviewer Valerie Singleton.
Joan Fontaine, you're a successful Hollywood movie star. You've had success, glamour, parties, travel, an exciting life, and yet you've called your book No Bed of Roses. Why?
I think in No Bed of Roses it explains a childhood which was no more severe than some childhoods, but where there were no relatives except a mother, where my mother was in a sense deserted by my father. And we ran away from home, my sister and I. She really ran away, and I was away, so I just stayed away. And then 4 marriages. That's not easy. The ups and downs of career. That's not easy. And
not as glamorous as it appears to people.
It certainly isn't. However, I'm out the other side of it. I'm a very happy woman. I feel very fortunate. I've accomplished a lot. I've done it all by myself. And I'm rather proud of that, and I'm proud of being an author.
I have to raise this, I'm sure it's been raised many times, but you have this feud with your sister Olivia de Havilland. Did this come about because you were rivals? I mean, she was a year older than you, and her success came more quickly than yours did. Did you find being...
I try to explain in the book that it really happened, I think, at my birth, because my mother said that Olivia, since we were born in Tokyo, there were a lot of almas and servants and all that sort of thing. And she was rather the cock of the walk, and then the little intruder comes in. Now, as an intruder, I was a very sickly baby, and I had eczema all over my body for 2 years. I was in cotton wool. So I must have got a great deal of attention, and she must have been told, don't disturb the sleeping child, or you can't go and see her because she's asleep, or whatever it is. And so I was not a little doll to play with. I was somebody who was upsetting her realm, as it were.
But people usually grow out of that when they grow older,
yes, they do,
don't they?
And she has not been able to.
She, not you, or both of you?
What have I got? I'm proud of an older sister. I have no resentment of any kind.
You actually, funnily enough, won an Oscar before she did for your performance in Suspicion. Was that a bone of contention as well, or not?
No, she wouldn't raise that. I mean, it's a fair fight, isn't it, if it is a fight at all. I feel a little guilty about it. But I feel a little guilty that Brian Aherne, to whom I was married, had never even been nominated, and he was there. So that was rather awkward only within me. But they, I hope, were happy for me.
Was it a role you were proud of? Do you think it's one of your better roles looking back?
Oh, yes, there's no doubt. And now it's directed by Hitchcock, and how lucky can one be?
But not one performance has really given you complete satisfaction. I mean, there must be 1 or 2, surely, to have given you
I don't think any artist, be it an opera singer, a pianist,
a writer, anybody, is completely satisfied with the performance ever. And they shouldn't be either.
Which is one of your favourites?
Oh, I have so many. I was lucky to have, well, the classics, really. In order, Rebecca, Suspicion, Constant, Nymph, Jane Eyre, This Above All, Letter from an Unknown Woman, Ivanhoe. I mean, I've been very lucky with them. And I've had marvellous leading men.
You said just now you've been married 4 times. And again, coming out of your book, you seem very much to need the sort of permanence and security in a marriage that you seem not to get in your childhood. And yet 4 marriages. Do you think Hollywood's to blame, that whirlwind kind of superficial life?
I think, Val, being the child of divorced parents makes one have a different attitude about marriage. I had never any real intention of it being forever and ever and ever and ever. Because, as I write in No Bed of Roses, the night before my first marriage, there was a telephone at midnight saying, please may I get out of this marriage. And that's not a very good start.
Yes, each one of your marriages seems to have something that goes wrong fairly near the beginning of it that almost casts out.
Absolutely. I think that marriage should be terribly truthful. And nobody should go into marriage with any secrets of any kind. And there were secrets in all my marriages that I discovered about my husband shortly after marriage, which was a terrible blow. And I don't think quite fair.
What are you doing now? You're not in Hollywood anymore, are you?
I've lived in New York for years, and I have a rather lovely apartment, all kinds of friends, which one does in a large city. In Hollywood, you had only friends that were in motion pictures, really. But to have the UN and many other things is very exciting. I find that this time in my life, this age that I'm at, is a marvelous age. Most women are terrified about getting older. It is lovely, especially if you have your own financial independence. That's very important, and I do. And I rely pretty much on myself for everything. And it's lovely to be able to choose the kind of life that I want to live and then go ahead and live it.
So, briefly, despite being called No Bed of Roses, there aren't too many regrets?
There are no regrets, because that's living. I can't regret having lived and learned.
For Joan, living and learning never meant just acting. Outside of Hollywood, she was a licensed pilot, flew in an international balloon race, trained as a cordon bleu cook, and was a shrewd player of the stock market. When she died in 2013, aged 96, at home in California, many referred to a quote that captured both her love of performance and the most famous of her relationships. She'd been asked how she'd like to die, and she'd answered, aged 108, flying around the stage in Peter Pan as a result of my sister cutting the wires.